This is Jim Semivan, and you are listening to That UFO Podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to That UFO Podcast. Little bit of a mini breakdown into a bit of an Ask Us Anything, as Dan has just found out. Introducing Dan for this one. Welcome back.
Hello. Obviously, surprise.
Yeah, disappointing surprise, really, isn't it? Dan going, yeah, you've just said my name. So this is going to be a mini breakdown because we're going to quickly touch on kind of the hearings are coming up on 26th of July. We discussed that last week on the breakdown, and I think it's just a nice chance to chat, even if briefly, for some of the buzz, what might or might not be happening. Things have moved on a little bit in the last week. And then into the AMA, which will cover off a lot of our thoughts, including some of the questions around the hearings and stuff anyway, Dan, to be honest. Sure. Huge response to the first show. Thank you very much to anyone who listened to me talking to myself for an hour, answering your questions. This will be out after my interview with Tim Burchett. So hopefully you've checked that one out. I'm sure you will have. It'll only have been a proper short, maybe 25, 30 minute interview. Busy guy, not a lot of time, so I appreciate that. I say that hoping it doesn't cancel in the next 2 hours, Dan, and then I'll look a right mug.
I mean, if the hearings aren't, kind of nice and glossy with icing on top, we know that it's because he didn't use that half hour that he was talking to you to
absolutely, it will be my fault 100%. So in advance of that, Dan, before we get to listener questions that'll make up the bulk of this show, from Patreon and email and a few more still from YouTube, God, there was a lot. We are, as we record this, 1 week away from the hearings. In a week's time we'll have had them. Where are you at right now with everything? Given it's been another few days since we spoke about it, and what you're expecting?
Well, we've had one of the officials kind of posting pictures of some slides that they're going to be using at the hearings. The rumors are flying thick and fast as to who's going to be included as a witness. And ultimately, I mean, I said this to you before we started. Ultimately, I'm wondering, what is their goal with this hearing?
Mm.
Is they think they're going to blow the whole cover up wide open, that by the end of the hearing we'll be showing pictures of craft that were classified previously? Or is it just present someone like Grush's story to a wider audience, to the public, in the setting of the house? I think that would be my main question, and I'm excited to watch, because whichever one it is, it's going to obviously move the ball down the field a little bit. That snowball gets bigger as it rolls. And hopefully it'll light a fire under people's butts to get in touch with their senators to say, okay, cool, the House hearings were great. Let's have Senate hearings now. And then if we get the Senate hearings, they get to push the executive, because, that's a Democratic held House, and the Democrats hold the White House at the moment. So it's going to be interesting seeing the fallout after it, but also, what exactly the goal is here.
Yeah, like you, I think the best we can hope for is a little bit of progress down the line. And I've had people get in touch with me, especially the last week. So thanks to everyone. I tried to respond to loads of people today, especially on email while I was in work, who I hadn't got back to over the last few weeks. People saying about, this is it. This could be capital D disclosure. My family's not really interested in what's going on. My friends aren't too fussed, and this is going to be huge. And I'm thinking it could be big, but I don't think this is going to be blow the lid off of things. It felt like last time we've had a few kind of turns of the ignition key. God, analogy already, I'm sorry. But I've not put this
3 minutes
down.
in.
I know, it's just like, it's natural now. We've had a few turns of the ignition key and the engine's almost started. And it's like, is this going to turn over this time? One for the mechanics and the petrol heads out there. So potentially, but I still don't think, as good as this potentially could be, it's going to be that wow moment people are expecting. Okay, now we've got the proof. I think this is going to hopefully set up more down the line, more regular open hearings. I think, Dan, we talked a couple of years ago now when the task force reports first came out and what those could be, and that's been a bit of a damp squib, hasn't it? That ever since that first one, we might as well never had any for what we've kind of have come out of it.
Yeah, we always get the phrase "nothing burger" thrown around, right? And they're good for analysis and to see other reporting measures working, if other things working. But ultimately, this year's one felt like a do-over of the first one that we had, because Arrow was starting over. So yeah, I totally hear what you're saying, and I'm eager for them to get going with it and be all they can be with this.
Yeah, I play FIFA quite a lot, and I get one of the big arguments about FIFA, and people say about Call of Duty and any kind of game, like series like that, is it's the same game every year with slightly updated names and strips, but the actual content's the same. And then I can see why people said that about the reports and whatnot, because sometimes the names change and sometimes, the aesthetics change, but largely we're getting the same kind of material. And it feels though that we're ready for something maybe a little bit more to kind of push that down the line. So fingers crossed. But like I say, Dan, there's a few questions within here based around that kind of stuff. We're going to share our thoughts, opinions on a whole load of topics. So thank you to everyone who sent in questions. We'll kick off with one from Newman, Dan. Cool. Newman asks, and I've not made any notes on my answers for these yet, and most of them I've not even proofread. So,
and these are new to me as well. So
I'd never let Dan know at all what they were. So, first one, what is a UAP-related rabbit hole we haven't looked deep enough into yet? So, anything for you, Dan, that you go, it gets touched on, but maybe you'd like to go down that conversation, but haven't?
I'm into the woo stuff, so I'm kind of always digging into all sorts of areas. But the one on my mind right now is the Homo naledi documentary came out on Netflix. I highly recommend people go watch it. And it just kind of, it's all about another human ancestor or another species that is very similar to you humans being around about 300,000 years ago and shattering our paradigms of things like we think our brains, the size of them, makes us special, and therefore it led to ritualistic burials and fire and communication, when this species proves that they were using their much, much smaller brain, about the size of an orange, for things that were as advanced as us, but about 300,000 years before we were doing it. So it kind of, there are some implications there that, maybe we weren't alone when we were developing, we were never alone. We just kind of destroyed the other species. It's interesting to talk about, and that kind of ancient civilization side of things. There's, just like with UFO, there's a lot of baggage with it when it comes along, right? With the whole ancient alien theorists and things like that. And I think there's a really interesting, subtler conversation to be had around these points and what our past looks like.
I think for all the answers I could give, and I've mentioned this being a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine as such, was the remote viewing side of things. Still,
sure.
I'd love to see down the line. People have talked a lot about like abductions and that sort of thing being something that needs to be brought up eventually, and I'm sure it will be, given the way the conversation would have to progress, but not yet. And I think one of those other things for me would be something like remote viewing. And, people talk about UAP, UFO relations to consciousness and everyone being connected and, all one kind of mind and some kind of force that's out there almost, for lack of a better phrase.
I like that. Basically,
yeah. Could you imagine one of these hearings down the line, them bringing out like the old like Stargate documents and, the stuff around like the Men Who Stare at Goats was based on, and all those guys, and Russell Targ being pulled out at one of these hearings, and that kind of stuff and that's pretty woo. That kind of stuff being talked about in that kind of setting, I think would be a little bit mind-blowing, but that seems like a million years away at the minute.
Yeah, you're right. That would be really cool, because that's essentially non-local consciousness, right? Like, we're getting into a lot of weird science with that subject. So yeah, I agree. And having been through the course with Simeon Hine, again, go take his course. It's really good. And kind of shown the protocols and things like that. There are a lot of misconceptions around remote viewing. I keep seeing people put picture in an envelope and just standing passers-by to guess what's in it, and it's like, it doesn't work that way. There are protocols, there are things you
thinking of Ghostbusters with the card scene where, it's a star, it's a square, and I can just imagine the mess they made of VLC Media Player, how badly a session like that could go. But no, good question, Newman. Thanks for kicking that off. We'll try not to spend too long on each question, depending on what it is, and get through as many as we can. Next up from Brian, he says, "Hi guys, be interested in your opinion on this. David Grush confirmed that agreements have been made between governments and non-human intelligences. I was thinking that indicates that the non-human intelligences are able to think and communicate in the same frame of reference as humans. Agreements with governments are a very human thing." Good point. "I think this means that the NHIs we are dealing with may not be that different from us. Indeed, we may be descended or related in some way."
That's a highly relevant question to what I was just talking about, right? With the
potentially
civilizations, and
because that's the idea, Dan, and we never kind of touched on that, but that one of these previous civilizations evolved past the technological point that we're at now.
Exactly,
and could be it. But even aside from that, that just opens up that whole conversation of, does any other alien / non-human intelligence would they even be able to comprehend? And not because they're not clever enough, but almost way beyond, agreements with a government. Why would they land down and say, oh, that guy in that big house must be in charge? They may have no concept of that, where they are from. That might not even be something, they could comprehend as to why that would be important. So I get that, yeah.
That's
I think
an
that
interesting
maybe,
one.
do you think that puts off a lot of people who aren't necessarily into the UFO topic, because thinking of presidents meeting up with aliens at secret Air Force bases is just too out there a concept?
Yeah, it's like that Galactic Federation stuff, right? Like, okay, there might be something akin to the Galactic Federation, but to call it that, and the picture we get in our heads when we say that of big government, that's probably not what it is. That's a really human concept. And yeah, absolutely correct. An agreement like that is a human concept. We see in nature, animals will work together all the time, but we don't see any paperwork that's signed, right? And stuff like that. It makes me think of us looking at like dogs or whales and trying to decode their language. We're super advanced and we can't understand them. Like, are we stupid because of that, or are they stupid because of that? It's a really interesting conversation point that I think will become more important going forward. When I interviewed Michelle Fournet, who decodes whale song, Lou Elizondo submitted a question that was basically, how would she approach decoding the language of a non-verbal species? And I think that's a really provocative question to think about, given who it's coming from. If the aliens or ET or, the non-human intelligence, if they don't speak English, if they don't make sound and communicate that way, where do we even begin? Is it light and vibration? Is that what we go for? And it kind of just starts linking in with a lot of stuff that's, part of the lore.
I think sometimes the franchising of names like Galactic Federation, again, can be incredibly off-putting. But it is what it is. You're putting a label on it for now for something that we have no idea if that even exists. But yeah, cool. Good point. Thanks, Brian. Benny had a couple of questions, Dan, so we'll try and smash through some of these really quickly.
Sure.
First one was, what's too woo for you? I'll start, because I've often said that the orb stuff, while I do believe there's something to it, can be way past me sometimes, because there are so many videos I see, especially on Facebook is one of the worst places for it, of what are clearly bugs flying past people's Ring doorbells, or dust particles or flies in the air, and they're claiming they're alien entities and beings, and it's not. I'm really sorry, but it's not. That stuff for me, just that can really put me off any kind of orb type sighting. But the metal stuffs, the metal spheres or whatever they may be, are pretty interesting, that Ross Coulthart and Jeremy Corbell and co have talked about, that we've got actual footage of from a military point of view. So yeah, what about you, Dan? Too woo?
Too woo for me, starseeds. I would say, like, I see people out there, on social media and stuff saying, I'm a starseed and I was placed here from, Zeta Reticuli, and I'm here to spread the love and the word of my species. And I struggle with that, because it's just, it's so, just the people that are like that, they're so immersed in it that it kind of puts me off. But then, I like to challenge myself as well, and thinking of panspermia and how life would be seeded here, and whether that could technically be called a hybrid, and therefore we are all starseeds. And
I think I'd be tempted to say I'm a Pisces to that in response. I always am. It sounds like that kind of astrology, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure. That's the kind of area it occupies.
And hi to all the starseeds. But again, I do get regular, semi-regular communications from people via mail and DMs and whatnot, that they are in touch with all kind of beings from different systems, and that's great, fantastic. I'm just not the guy to go to for that. And that's not that, I don't wish you well with your quest and getting your information out, but I'm just not the guy to come to with your being in contact with other beings and other entities. Other people will certainly take you up on that, and I can certainly pass that on and those informations on to you if you wanted, but definitely not my bag. Interesting question. We'll keep this one really short, Dan. What's driving the increasing division within ufology? For me, I don't think it's increasing. I just think there's more people involved, and social media has a hell of a part to play in that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Social media pushes people to the extremes. You know, we only have 140 characters or 240 or whatever it is to kind of explain ourselves. And 9 times out of 10, when you speak to people you disagree with in person, their point is much more subtle and they're much kinder and less blunt about what they have to say. So
that's it for me. It's not the character limit. It's the face-to-face, like I've said, for the people that have slung mud at me or you or anyone else. That's fantastic. Well done. I'm sure you're happy in your life. But I reckon if you could meet these people face to face, they wouldn't be like that. The amount of conversations where people would be like, oh, do you know what? And that's not just us, just in general, people who don't like each other and don't get on, the same names who are always arguing back and forward on Twitter and whatnot, which is really immature. They probably, some of them would surprisingly get on in real life, I imagine, or at least be a lot more cordial to each other. Like, if I imagine if I worked with everyone I work with, had never met them face to face, but we communicated only on Microsoft Teams, you could imagine you would have that main Teams page, all the sub Teams pages, and then your own little private chats and stuff. And that's just what happens anyway when you know people face to face. We've got group chats we're in, but we also have our own where we talk regular. Like, so that's just life. And I think that's what's missing massively is it's a worldwide subject, but everyone's so all over the place with it that you don't get to see these people face to face. So
absolutely agree. And we kind of get that phrase thrown around, like, you know, debunker is one extreme, a believer is the other extreme, and we have kind of this whole spectrum in the middle. And no one in this community believes the same stuff, right? So you have to just get to know the people and talk to them properly. So, and I realize I'm a bit of a hypocrite for saying that because, you know, of how I think of Mick West and folk like that. But, you know, it's a work in progress.
Interesting. Next question, again from Benny. What is the minimum standard for disclosure? In brackets, alien in a wheelbarrow on the White House lawn being the gold standard. I love how Benny's went straight for they're dead by being in a wheelbarrow, which I'm guessing.
Weekend at Bernie's right there. That's a sequel.
I'll tell you what, though, it did make me think what my minimum would be for me to say I'm comfortable that we now have capital D disclosure would be a foreign government presenting either an image or video of some kind of craft either in space or in the atmosphere to say we believe this isn't of human origin. That would be enough for me to go, okay, it's been confirmed. That kind of typical, you know, at the beginning of like Independence Day where they're in the Oval Office and they show you the satellite imagery of the big discs coming along. That kind of, okay, we've got some things that we've, you know, managed to capture on film or whatever, and we don't think they're human. That for me would be there's no going back from that, because I don't think the follow-up press conference is, sorry folks, our mistake, it was weather balloons, you know, or it was whatever it might have been. It was a hobby craft group, and we shot down one of their prized assets. What about you? What's the minimum standard?
Oh, that's a really good question. Project Unity actually asked a similar question on Twitter the other day, and I replied, and I kind of said it's hard to think of any one thing that's going to do it. Like, I would almost want the world to stop and have this kind of, you know, all the leaders address the people in the different countries. There be in a scientific team to present the data and say, this is what, you know, essentially to use your example, like we've seen this in space. This is the analysis that we've done. Here's the raw data. We have 10 teams that have looked at it and all come to this conclusion. All the presidents of all the countries that are announcing the winner alone. Like, it's a fairly high bar, I know, but we're in the age of deepfake. So
no, that's,
you know,
that's
I always like narrow my eyes like that Fry gif, you know. Welcome back Futurama in a few days, by the way.
Oh, is it a few days' time?
Yeah, I think it was like a week yesterday.
Oh, nice. Very much looking forward to that. Leslie Keane, still from Benny. I've skipped over one because we've kind of answered it, Benny. The next one, Leslie Keane seemed uncomfortable when talking about alien bodies in her interview about David Grush. Why do you think that was? For me, I think Leslie's one of those folks who needs to see the evidence either herself or enough of it that she can go on and talk about it. And I think, given that Leslie writes for the New York Times and other kind of high-end publications still, that's probably something that would raise eyebrows in the wrong way for her in her career to write about at this minute. That's just my opinion. What about you, Dan, on that one?
Yeah, I'd say the same. You know, she likes to keep the kind of different subjects in different areas. So Leslie's show on surviving death was really interesting, but she didn't mix that in with the ATIP stuff, for example. It's a very different body of evidence for those two things. So yeah, I would say that she understands the weight of bringing a point like that into the conversation, and she wasn't convinced by what she'd been shown or what she'd heard that it was enough for her to mention it.
So we'll move on to Shardul, and Shardul sent in a couple of questions. Question 1. Now that we have an idea that it's not just the US, but a Five Eyes foreign materials programme, how do you tackle disclosure in the UK? And how could we as a collective facilitate disclosure in the UK?
Good question. We don't really get a say in the UK, right? Like we get to write to our politicians, but we don't even have a FOIA program like they have in America, where they say, we're going to be honest and we're going to give you everything that we have. The UK can literally just withhold whatever they want. The last time there was a leak that was something revelatory, not to do with UFOs, but to do with the Snowden kind of leak and the documents that came out of that, the journalists that had the hard drives flew back into the UK, explained to the customs agents all of this information is stored online, so these aren't the only copies, and the agents still destroyed those hard drives with hammers. We don't really have freedom of speech here in the same way as people do everywhere else. I would say just keep writing to your local politicians, keep bringing it up, even if they treat you with an eye roll. Try and present it in a really mature way. Be concise, and hope that the almost constant scandal nature of the politics in the UK eventually gets overwritten by this stuff.
Just to still stick on that idea of disclosure in the UK, this is one of the issues I have with what's a very small number of people on social media who are involved, or fans, or whatever you want to call it, or influencers, writers, bloggers, podders, YouTubers on the UFO topic, thinking that we're about to have in the next week this huge disclosure moment. Like this reverberates nowhere near around the mainstream media and the rest of the world the way it does in the US. And even then, it's still reserved for right now, like News Nation, for all they're doing a good job covering it. That's not a huge channel, and they're using this to try and grow. I don't think they're going to pin their flag to the mast on this one. And for me, that's one of those things, if I really take a step back and just look at where we are, that kind of bigger picture, I can't see in the coming weeks the UK suddenly taking a huge interest in this topic without that sort of huge revelatory moment from a US government with some real evidence. I think anyone coming forward, even if someone stood up from a Lockheed Martin at this, and I don't think we will have that, but next week, and they said, yeah, I worked on a program where we looked at recovered materials, some of which were claimed to be potentially of non-human origin. I don't think that would really touch the sides in the UK. I think that would still be a side story on any kind of news platform, and some of the bigger ones potentially still avoiding it or using it as and finally in the news. Do you agree with that, Dan? Or
yeah, I would totally agree with that. It's just going to be hard to get our politicians to open up on this. We had I want to say the Condine report. I always mix it up with the Condom report. Pretty sure Condine. But yeah, we had that. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there that's redacted. It felt like from what's there and available to read that we were a little bit further than where the US is now. There were some answers proposed that were, again, all redacted. We don't get to read them. But this was back, early 2000s. So you got to wonder where we are now with it. If someone in the government isn't keeping an eye on this, I'd be very surprised, at least in the MOD. But whether they're going to talk to us about it or not, I don't think so. It'll all be back channel stuff,
Yeah, and why else we're not going to get that kind of huge leap forward is some of the public appetite. And as you've been talking, Dan, out of my left ear, which is not covered by the headphones, some of the locals that live nearby me in the wonderfully cultured area I live in have been swearing like a trooper outside of the shed as they walk past. So hopefully, I don't think the microphone did pick it up. But
I haven't heard anything for what it's worth.
And no one would have understood a word they said, given their Geordies, and they were rough. So yeah, that was I don't think you really picked it up, folks. But yeah, as Dan was talking, I had the culture of the Northeast in my other ear. It's a very thin shed. Question 2, if everything happening right now pans out, the implications are that there is another and potentially multiple other non-human civilizations visiting us, had one just walked past. What would be your first question to them, Dan? So we find out there's a non-human intelligence. They've picked Dan on the lucky dip to come on down, and you're standing there. Let's go with, I'm going to go with the District 9. You're in Johannesburg, South Africa, or Cape Town, and the aliens have picked there. The ramp comes down, they walk out, little bow, you get the first question.
Who let the dogs out? No, I'm not gonna.
Someone goes, your mic's on mute. Yeah, hi.
Probably. I would want to know what their perspective on the universe and their history was. It would be really interesting to see how we were discovered by them. And of course, I'd want to know what human history looked like to them, because the idea of us might go back further. But I don't want the first question to be about us. I kind of want to see how they see the universe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the obvious one everyone would ask is, where are you from? I think if I had to skip past that one, keeping it basic, it would still be, are there other civilizations similar to you that aren't human, out there? Just to find out, is it just you? Have you just found us and that's it? Or are there more? And then I think that just opens up. Because imagine they said, we've been everywhere and no, there's not. You'd be like,
yeah,
fair enough, it is just us then. Things all of a sudden get very big and very small again.
I'd probably start yelling at them if they said that. I'd be like, that's what we thought, and now we're here. All different parts through human history, we thought we were alone, and we never were. So,
can you imagine they come down, they assimilate for a little while, we start to get on with each other, us and the Greys, for example, they're in their saucers, and we're starting to share technology, and one day a black triangle flies overhead, and the Greys just go, what the hell is that? Oh, we thought that was one of yours as well. I think we've had that kind of conversation before.
Yeah, and that's funny. Very Secret Machines-y. I think we've spoken about that, where I don't want to spoil it for you. Was it in the first book? Or am I bringing something?
No, non-spoilery, but where I'm not too far from the end. I say the first audiobook. The guys went up in the locust. Is it the locust? It's called the
locust. Yeah. That's the black triangle. Yeah,
he's encountered other craft there, and he's kind of had a little bit of a dogfight with one and got away.
Okay, but another black triangle, right?
Yes, I don't think they've quite described it, but I think he said like something similar. I don't think they've said exactly what it was just yet, but you totally get the idea of what's going on. So yeah.
I'll stop that line because I don't want to spoil book 2 for you.
That's fine. I'm going to be on that one soon. I've got the audiobooks, folks. So, question 3, we're at a turning point in ufology where we can expect a lot more people who previously dismissed the topic to be open to it. Wishful thinking. What advice would you give to navigate this topic, and what pitfalls should people avoid? So, I would go, Dan, if you want to give us one thing people should, do to navigate the UFO topic who are new to it, and one thing they should avoid doing.
So I would say avoid. No, I'm gonna go best foot first.
Mm-hmm.
People look for clarity and seriousness when you're talking about this subject. So for me, the first thing I show anyone is that clip of Obama talking about, that there are craft in the sky that we don't know the movements or the patterns on. We don't know how they do it.
Yeah.
That's a really hard-hitting statement for people, and it almost, you see the eyes glaze straight after that. They almost need a week to process that.
Yeah.
So I would say start with something hard-hitting like that from an official that people know and respect, and just keep it brief. The thing I'd say to stay away from are things like, unless you're asked about it in the conversation, are things like personal experiences, because everyone just assumes that people are just nuts.
Yeah.
They're not. We all have our experiences, but I seldom bring mine up when I'm talking to people about UFO stuff, because who am I? What evidence do I have to kind of show this, compared to someone like Obama saying, yeah, we got video of them and it's been a repeated thing. That's 100 times better than me just saying, oh, I saw these lights in the sky. People just kind of edge away from me when I go down that road,
Yeah. And that pitfalls one, to be fair, like if you put 100 people in a room and one of them had a UFO experience of some kind and shared it with the room, they're the crazy person because they're the only one that's had that experience. But if you put 100 people in a room and it's 99 experiencers and one person who has no interest in the UFO topic, it's like, who's the crazier one in there? Because, you're denying all of that. So, yeah, it can go either way. And I get that's one of the frustrations. Advice for me, I'd probably turn people on to either like James Fox Phenomenon. Watch this as a very quick catch-up of where we're at. Leslie Kane documentary, Ross Coulthart documentary, one of those for a modern, serious take on here's where we're at. Now you're caught up. Don't worry too much about all the stuff that happened before. Now we'll get back to that. Pitfalls people should avoid. So I suppose this is a bit of a quirky one, but as and when you get the White House lawn landing tomorrow, I would say the plethora of celebrities who all of a sudden start to talk about UFOs, I can only imagine the the Love Island crew, the Geordie Shore crew, the Jersey Shore crew, the Real Housewives of Cheshire, Real Housewives of Orange County, Loose Women. I don't know what the version again is called in the US. They've got their Loose Women type show. No, panel of female presenters. Or is it the View? The View, I think it's called.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it might be The View. Or if you're a fan of the band from Dundee, The View. But yeah, a couple of listeners appreciated that. But yeah, shows like that, all of a sudden, talking about something they know nothing about, would be stay away from that, stick to the good stuff, the tried and tested, experienced folks. And you know what? See, on the day that happens, I think I'd love to see what like a Dr. Stephen Greer comes out and says. Just morbid curiosity. That'd be, yeah. Not that it's going to be he was wrong, because imagine they came down and went, right, okay, first off, can we have a big hand for Dr. Stephen Greer for facilitating this? So many of us would be like, oh no. Yeah. I'd be straight on to him going, I always believed you, Stephen. I've downloaded your app. So yeah, but no, thank you, Shardul. That was some really good questions. I appreciate those. Got us thinking. The next one's a question we've been asked a few times, but it's always a nice one to come back to, Dan, to summarise. From Amanda Biggs. I think I covered this in the first one, so I'll just let you take the lead on this one, and then I'll very quickly touch on it. Based on all of your UFO experiences, education, exposure through reading and interviews to date, what do you think UFOs are? Where do you think they originate from, and what do you think their purpose is? So where are they from? What are they, and why?
Big questions. So first of all, I'm just going to throw out the I don't know. Like, this is literally speculation, just based on what I've done. I would say we're looking at a multitude of different things. Some of what we see might be natural phenomena. And when I say that, I mean natural phenomena we don't understand, like Earth lights and things like that seem to have a consciousness aspect, but they move through materials and move through the visible spectrum to infrared and, disappear from our vision. They seem wondrous, but it seems like that's one thing. And then we also have the visiting craft, the beings that come and take people, the consciousness aspect. So I think we're looking at a whole load of different phenomena that is ET, but is also natural and everything in between. Where they're from, I would say from out there and from here, and probably from, how do they phrase it in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Just a little bit to the left. That's how they kind of talk about multiverse stuff. It's here, but it's a little bit, to the left.
I always liked Doctor Who, the beings that you could only see out the corner of your eye.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
you couldn't look directly at them. So anyone that's kind of sees shadow people and stuff, that could be what they're seeing, So what was it? Where do I think they're from? What do I think they are?
And why? What's their purpose?
Why? I mean, that's a good question. We don't even have a purpose for us. Each of us vary on what we think life is for.
Speak for yourself. I have to feed my kids several times a day, and they are hungry and expensive.
But that's what I mean, right? Your idea of what life is very different to my idea, and that's within one species. And two, we're fairly similar specimens of the same species, and we have
both handsome specimens, male specimens. Yeah, of course. Thank you. Go on.
So yeah, the why of it. Again, I would expect a multitude of different things. Probably a tourist point. If we found another planet and spaceflight was easy, we could just go see them. And even if it wasn't easy, people would go see them. We saw the sub go down to the Titanic a few weeks back, and that seems strenuous. People go to Everest all the time, and that seems strenuous. So I think there could be an aspect of tourism there. There's going to be an aspect of resources as well. So yeah, curiosity and resources. And also we could just be on an intergalactic shipping lane, right? Who knows?
Yeah, I'll do it very quickly then. UFOs, all of the above and a little something else. So some are alien, some are something like alien, and some might just be drones, like kind of robotic drones that aren't human. Where do they originate from? Probably everywhere. Like you say, deep space, locally, this planet, but not this reality. Is, I think, always a popular one these days. What do you think their purpose is? All kinds of stuff. I've always used that gaming analogy of, someone's interested in us, someone's not interested, someone wants to cause a little bit of chaos, others are just watching from afar, some are just studying. Who knows? But nothing we don't do as a species as well. Probably it's common throughout the universe and multiverse as it is. So yeah, awesome. Question from Metal Matt. So thanks for that one, Amanda. Metal Matt says, what do you know about what David Grush was hinting at when he talked about the Italian down saucer from the 1930s? Is there a book or any information on this case? I think it was kind of all touched on at the time, wasn't it? And Graham Rendell joined me to look over that one quickly, didn't he, Dan, a while back?
Yeah, that's right. Graham did a really good job looking into that case. And, it's come out that there are some less than savory ufologists attached to those documents and where they come from. I'm really curious as to whether Grush has seen something else that we're not privy to. When he's talking about this being almost a factual thing that happened, I wonder if the evidence that he's given to the IG isn't more sensitive and sourced from the US as opposed to something that was given to someone else by a ufologist from Italy who was known for fabricating things, So I would hold my tongue on saying whether it's true or not, but just that there seems to be some really curious things around that case.
Do you think that's a good point, Dan? Do you think sometimes, especially for David Grush, who, as he said, he's never seen the pictures or the bodies or the videos, he was privy to documentation, and a lot of documentation given his clearance in his job role previously, that people can assume that everything that's passed through government hands in terms of documentation it's a report and it means it's true and it's right. There can be plenty of documents passed through that we've had a report of and it's worth reading, but we don't know. And as you say, it's likely something that's potentially been debunked or has been proven to be a hoax or something that's just not known, but likely not anything alien or, exotic. But it still has passed through some kind of, we've heard of this, but with, credibility wise, on a scale of 0 to 100, it's low. That kind of thing. Yeah. And that can pass through the eyes of a David Grush.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, take, for example, the Wilson docs, right? We know they were admitted to the congressional record, so they stand in an official archive now. In 100 years, is someone going to come back to them and just think that was, 100% factual, even if, assume nothing else is found out about them? Would they look at that and kind of go, oh, well, it's here, therefore it must be real? Not necessarily. Like you say, evidence is gathered and it's submitted for analysis. The one that comes to mind is that Adam and Eve book by something Chan, I think it was. All about like this alternate take on the origins of humanity and what happened in the past. And it has, cycles of disaster and things like that, which line up with some other people's theories. But as a result, it kind of gets raised up as this, oh, well, this proves it's all true then. Not necessarily. That was put there by an agent who came across it and thought, this is interesting. Let's put it into the pile of stuff that we have to look at. Without seeing their analysis, there's no way to know whether that was real or not, Just because we chuck Harry Potter in the CIA reading room doesn't make it true.
Just about to say the same thing. I was going to go with someone who submitted the Prisoner of Azkaban to the hearings, That's it.
Exactly.
No, that's very fair. So thanks for that question. Lucamus asks, in a little bit of context, it appears the US and by extension the other Five Eyes nations are on a course to disclose some information about crash retrieval and foreign material exploitation programs. We hope, working under the assumption that other superpowers have their own versions of the same and that there really has been a technological Cold War that was previously out of public sight but would become partly exposed. Question 1. Do you think this would help ease tensions between the superpowers or would it create deeper division and distrust?
I would say probably... So there's two sides of me in this. The one side of me that's optimistic and thinks people can be kind and great, thinks that it would help ease tensions and we would all come together against this great threat and be one and united. The more realist side of me thinks, hell no, that's not going to ease tensions. That's going to make everyone really paranoid. Who's working with who? Which species are working with which species? How far have they gotten in their technological, reverse engineering? I don't think it would help ease tensions at all. And that it makes me a little sad, but it's a reflection of who runs government, right? Like it doesn't necessarily reflect how you or I would want the world to be run.
Just people as humans as a species, because good people do bad things and bad people do good things. Yeah. Like, have you seen? And this is a little bit of a. Have you seen the movie Crash? You will have, yeah. Great movie for anyone who's never seen it. Go watch it. And it's not about UFOs, even though it says crash. It's a bit like Love Actually, but really serious, where lots of different stories come together to tell you.
That's an amazing way to describe Crash. I'm using
but it is, isn't it? Like, you can't say it's not. But is it Ethan Hawke? Ethan Hunt?
Sure.
Ethan Hunt?
Yeah, I think.
No, God, sorry, it's Matt Dillon. God, that was totally wrong. Matt Dillon plays the cop who basically sexually assaults Thandie Newton. And It's horrible, a really awkward scene. But later so you think he's a bad guy throughout the whole movie. Like, you think you're a really horrible person. You've done something really horrible to somebody who is vulnerable. But then later in the film, I won't go into detail to spoil it, but he saves her life. And there's a moment where they look at each other and she's like, "You've done something really horrible to me, but you've now just saved my life." And it's that whole, you can do something bad, but be a nice person, but also be a nice person and do something bad and everything in between. So yeah, that's not to say that in this whole UFO topic, good people haven't had to do bad things that you may look at as being a bad thing. Doesn't make them a bad person, and vice versa. I hope that made sense.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of easing tensions for me between the superpowers, I don't think so. I don't think it would make a difference if they managed to come into, God, if a load of alien species landed and started sharing technology, there would be what we see on the surface and what we see in the background. And that would still go on exactly the same. And I think I mentioned this last week to you, Dan, as well, about something that, and this might be related to one of the questions before or after, I get a little frustrated with the concept that once we have this wonderful technology, and I actually had to delete some tweets the other day because I knew it would have started a big debate and potential argument with some people, not in a bad way, but I couldn't be bothered with it. I'm too busy in the next few weeks with work to spend too much time on socials. But the idea that we get this exotic technology that overnight we have no more fossil fuels, no more buses, cars, planes, trains. All the medicine is suddenly free, and automobiles. Everything's cured. That doesn't happen overnight at all. Everything will still be monetized and distributed and franchised, and you will just have, look at the Jetsons. There were crap flying saucers commercially used and really good Tesla model versions. That's all that would happen. So the idea that overnight everything's binned and, that's it, the planet's saved, just isn't true. I don't see how, if you really think logically or critically about it, how any of that even makes sense. Unless someone literally shoots a ray gun that changes the planet overnight. Can't see it. Thanos snap style. That's it. That would be the only thing.
And even that snap was against people's will, right? So does
not
that change
Thanos's,
anything?
Not Thanos's. Sometimes you think he was right. But yeah, so question 2, Dan. Do you think that domestic reaction would tend toward keeping foreign or retrieved materials within the control of the defence forces for the benefit of national defences? Or would society be more likely to want the material moved into the hands of academia and scientific organisations that could provide a wide range of public benefits? I suppose I've kind of covered my point on that there, but if you want to come in.
I'd say probably both. Any critical kind of thing that could be used for weaponry in the name of defense, which we all know is a synonym for offense these days. But anything that can be used for defense would be kept hush-hush. But I have absolutely no doubt that there would be and this is the other side of things, the governments wouldn't work together any better than they do now. But science, when you look at the black hole, like the gravity wave announcements that happened a few weeks back, that was a worldwide announcement with so many different people from so many different countries working on it. So science is very, world collaboratively minded, whereas governments aren't. And I think the public organizations, they would start kind of eking out bits of technology that could be useful. But again, you're right, it wouldn't be free. We'd still be, paying Apple for our phone that we wouldn't need a battery for 2,000 years or something,
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, spot on. Totally. Good questions. Thank you for that one. Next up, question from Gary. Gary, I used to work with, Dan, the
cool.
Blink-182 fan.
Hey, Gary.
Hi,
Nice.
Gary. Gary's a big, tall, hunky fireman, by the way. Folks out there. But he's taken, so hands off.
Is he on calendars?
Some kind of calendars, I'm sure. Yeah, you'll appreciate that. Gary asks, from your first podcast to now, what do you think the positive moves forward have been? I don't mean your shed upgrade or Michael Beale. That's the Rangers manager, folks. And what do you think the negatives are? So, Dan, positive moves forward in the last kind of 3 years in the UFO topic?
So I would have to highlight the legislation there and everything that comes with it. Like, that's to do with activism. It's to do with politicians being switched on to this subject. It's to do with people taking the subject seriously enough to actually do the work and ask the questions. And the legislation is a result of all that. And that just seems to be getting more specific and stronger the further we go. Like this year's is really, if the first one had been like this, we'd be a lot further, put it that way. So yeah, I would say the legislation is the best thing to come from this. The lesser things to come from this would be
one lesser thing.
Just one thing. I would say the infighting, and I don't just mean the communities. I mean between factions like Stephen Greer and the group that Elizondo kind of counts amongst friends and things like that. I just think that kind of stuff. It looks ugly. It looks immature when we're talking about embracing another species. That stuff just highlights that humans on a basic level don't really have the patience or tolerance for first contact right now.
Yeah, no, fair enough. For me, positives, slightly similar to what Dan said. For me, just the mainstream politicians who are happy to now talk about the UFO topic openly and positively, and that you're hearing the terminology used by some really serious people like non-human technology, recovered materials, organic bodies, and they're talking aliens. Essentially, that's huge for me. And the negatives, I suppose that the impact social media, for all it's helped me massively, and I enjoy it, the impact social media has in a negative way on any topic, let alone the UFO topic, where there are so many voices and opinions, and it's just social media, for all its great points, and there are, for given that the people that don't like it are on it, which I always find strange, but given it does have its negatives, the negatives can be that everyone suddenly has a voice and an opinion, and it just largely is a space for arguments rather than healthy reasoned debate. And I can't. I've said it so many times. Just mute and block and keep your feed to see the stuff that you want to see. And I've got plenty of stuff that I don't agree with on my feed, but it's people that I would either see as reasoned, or I'm happy just to read their opinion and move on, not necessarily agreeing with it, because I don't know how you learn in life from not discussing things with people that you don't agree with. Again, I'll just mention, see the Ben Shapiro and Russell Brand podcast that they've done together, if people haven't watched that yet, because it's two people from very different viewpoints and backgrounds and upbringings discussing things that they don't agree the other person, lives their lives by, but they do it in an adult way, like a reasoned, mature way, which, we could all do with a lot more of. Just because you don't agree doesn't mean it's right, and vice versa. So, live a little, folks. Disagree with someone and still be friends afterwards.
Yeah, I do.
Question from Jean. Do you feel that events are starting to inch forward faster, or is that just an illusion?
Yes, in a word. The snowball is kind of gathering speed. That's the visual that I would use. Pre-2017, nothing was happening. Now it just feels like every other week something big is happening. So much more so than the first year that UFO Twitter was kind of going and the community was railing on this. I think things are moving faster.
I would say yes, but there is absolutely just as much chance of any progress that we are sitting in a year's time talking about or 2 years' time or 3 years' time, the next iteration of Arrow or whatever may come along, and the new person in charge and a new type of report coming out that's going to show us some things. So that's why I've always said anyone who's disillusioned or jaded with the topic, who have been involved in it for decades and decades and decades, will say they've seen this all before. You can understand why, and you can see that frustration. So yeah, I think we are seeing progress, Gene, but I think I do have the sympathies for folks who look and say we're going to be in the same place next year, the same place the year after, and I'll still be here talking about it. So hey ho, or as some people call it, the grift, I believe is how they word that in life. But yeah, there we go. So yeah, thanks, Gene. Good question. Similar theme actually from Tree of Life, from what Gary asked. Have your personal views on the topic shifted from when you first started making the show? For me, in 3 and a bit years, yeah, I think massively. I came into this with the idea that, other spacecraft coming from other planets, and, there's more and more evidence that it looks like we're being visited by quote unquote aliens. And then I think, like we said earlier, Dan, more and more the idea of different realities becoming, potentially true, and, robotic drones coming from other planets, Greys being AI clones, or all that kind of good stuff that we like to talk about and speculate about. Yeah, I think I'm much more open to a lot more ideas, and I still make up my own mind, but I listen to as many folks' opinions as I can.
Yeah, I would largely agree with that. More knowledge equals better ideas, and and you can refine it as you go. Like for me, learning to refine those ideas and be able to let go of the things that just don't fit into the puzzle piece anymore, that's been a really valuable skill that kind of, I would say, I've developed over the course of doing the show, with you. And it's changed some of my opinions on like some very famous cases. So originally I would have been all in on Bob Lazar. Now I'm kind of dubious about it. I kind of know a lot more about elements, how they're found, so on and so forth. So my ideas have changed. So yeah, at the very least, the learning done through the show, through the interviews, through the people that I've met, through networking, have all helped me refine what it is that I thought.
And see, even just outside of that, just to go back on what I said before, though, social media helps with that in a way. If you can take it at face value and scroll and read and go, oh, okay, totally disagree with that, but I like an idea or a concept, and can that apply to something else? And kind of that's how new theories come up, and speculative ideas. And otherwise, it's just an echo chamber of the same people saying the same things, and nothing improves or goes forward. And we've said this a long time ago, Dan, haven't we? But when this all comes out, we could all be wrong.
Yeah.
Every single one of us. We're not all going to be right, but every one of us could be wrong. And I mean every single person.
Most of us will be right. Like 99% of us will be completely wrong about this.
99% of you will be completely wrong about this. Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. This is why you should hold things lightly, so that no one gets I told you so. It's just like, okay, we're in a new place. We're developing.
Oh, there will be I told you so on that day from people. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people should try and bite their tongues on that front, Yeah. A no-in smirk is enough.
Yeah. That's why Graham Rendell's played it perfectly. Non-committal to the very end, isn't he? Like, yeah. Hates the idea of aliens. Tree of Life also asks, what are some of our favourite books? Or we've mentioned books quite a lot, I think, in the past, Dan. But what about favourite fictional UFO or alien-related movie or TV series?
Ooh, that's a good one. I was particularly fond of, I watched a film called Phoenix Forgotten a few days back with Elena. And that's like a found footage film based around the Phoenix Lights. And it uses a lot of the real footage and stuff like that and plugs it in. And it's just really good. I don't see people really talking about it much.
I've never seen that or heard of it.
It's genuinely good. It's Jerry Bruckheimer's company. So.
I thought you were going to say it's genuine. I was going to say that. I don't
yeah, it's real.
Yeah, it's all real.
And honestly, for me, like as someone that's into film, I think it's one of the stronger found footage films anyway.
Okay.
It's the only one that, when you see the people filming in these situations where they're like being attacked or something, and you're like, why are they still filming? This doesn't make any sense. This film completely justifies why they were still filming. And yeah, it stuck with me. It really captured that kind of the bug that you get when you have an experience or get into this subject that you want to solve it, So I would say that Phoenix Forgotten.
Yeah, I was going to say, repeat the name of it, because I know podcasts well enough that people hear something and then go, oh, what did he say it was? I hope he repeats it and then forget. So yeah, Phoenix Forgotten. Is that on like YouTube or Netflix or?
I don't know. You'll definitely find it online.
I hope you watched it via legal means, Dan, of course.
Yeah, of course. Legally on my laptop through means I shall not describe.
Dan's not a hypocrite for supporting filmmakers, of course. Dan will have absolutely paid for that, won't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for me, I always go back to like, I love Independence Day for the whole film and the size of it, and I think it still stands up now to being a very good film. But I like bits of UFO movies in terms of like how the aliens arrive, what they look like, and I think sometimes seeing them can be like spoilery or spoil it a little bit. It's the maybe what's not there can be more interesting. I think with any kind of film, Signs I think was really close to being a great movie, and just missed it a little bit at the end when you see the alien.
What was the miss for you?
When you see it.
With like the design?
Yeah, it looked like Abe from Abe's Odyssey. A little bit.
Sure, I can see that.
But I loved the build and where it was going. Also, actually, War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise. I used to work in the cinema when that came out, And I know when they were filming it, they made the point you were going to see an alien movie, but from the point of view of the family and the family's trauma and experience. And there were just some bits I was like, there's the point where his son goes over the hill. There's a battle going on.
That's
and he's like, I need to see it. Yeah. And he's like, you don't, and you never get to see it. And the son goes over, and then it's like, he's dead because it's like a huge explosion.
But he doesn't. Yeah, he's not dead though, right? Like that was my one thing from the film. Like you see the explosion, and then right at the end, he just shows up again.
Oh, does he?
Just like, what? How did he survive? Like, why didn't he just come back over the hill if he was fine? Like, what?
I thought the whole point was he goes over and then bang, he's dead. Okay, but like I would have loved to have seen a little bit of the battle. But I get that wasn't the point. But stuff like I'm like, I want to see what would it look like. And
yeah, what was that one? 10 Cloverfield Lane was pretty cool as well. I like that idea.
I watched that not too long ago, and it was like, it was good. It goes
up until the end. I think the whole bit where you're like, is it an invasion? Isn't it an invasion? These two people are just in a bunker underground. For me, if that was my movie, I never would have revealed if something was going on or not. But
what do you think?
It was cool to see the psychology of people.
This could be a whole pod on its own, so maybe we come back to it one time because we could do this all day, couldn't we?
Yeah, sure.
District 9, I think, has a really, really good concept as well, and I know the sequel is going to get made at some point. Sure. Once Neil Blomkamp's Gran Turismo movie comes out, and go see it, folks, just so he makes a District 9 sequel, because if we don't get the money. But I love the fact it was that whole. Everyone always says that aliens would land on the major capitals or one of the big cities. It wasn't. It was a slum in South Africa.
Yeah.
That they're refugees and they assimilate with the population and they have to start trading. And they've got this huge, big piece of technology that's defunct almost because it's broken down. And I love that. I love the aspect of it in the story. And it's just like a guy who's like, he's a care worker, a social worker almost, isn't he?
Yeah,
for
right.
for the aliens, and they're called prawns. And yeah, I thought that was pretty close to being maybe the perfect UFO movie. I'd still probably have to give it to Independence Day for getting the sequel.
It's just a classic, isn't it?
Yeah.
One of the ones I'd like to just throw in here that kind of keeps that weirdness that you can't really grasp the alien thing would be Annihilation. That was Natalie Portman, and basically they call it the shimmer, and it lands on Earth, and it's just this expanding area that seems to change life within it. And it doesn't seem to be, there's no alien you can rock up to and go, "Hi, I'm Dan," and we're finally meeting. It just seems to be this really weird abstract thing that's doing things that no one in the film understands. And that goes right until the very end of the movie. Like, you never really get a good grasp on what the alien is. And also honorable mention to The Expanse, that really does it does well with kind of the ideas of the infighting that it would cause between humans if any alien substance was ever found.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome. I'll tell you what, we'll do one more question, Dan, and I think we'll do another part for part 2, okay? Because that's has been going almost an hour now, and people will be getting sick of it. But there's lots more questions.
How far
to get
through the list are we? Like 50%?
Halfway, yeah, halfway.
It's just such a good conversation.
Yeah, halfway.
And such good questions.
So, last question, and it's probably a nice one to round up on. Dalamar asks, what is the single most convincing, compelling UFO event to you personally, and why? You can't pick Gimbal, Go Fast, or Tic Tac.
So the single most convincing, because they said to me personally,
yeah,
I wouldn't go for those. I would go for one of my own experiences, where I saw the light basically come from the north, track above me, thought it was a satellite, and then at a certain point in the sky, it just stopped. And it stopped for like a dramatic amount of time. I counted like 30, 40 seconds. And then it started falling down to the horizon in like a leaf motion, like a leaf on the wind. And I know that satellites, when they're moving, can kind of give off that effect. But when I say a leaf motion, I'm not talking side to side by like a millimeter. I'm talking side to side by like 5 centimeters every time. Like, these were dramatic sweeps. And then once it reached the horizon, it went from the southern horizon to the northern horizon in maybe like 2 seconds and just disappeared. That, to me, is my most convincing UFO event. That was a personal one. There was movement in it that just doesn't look like anything that I know that humans make. But the sucky thing is that I don't really have evidence of it happening. So it's one of those things, like I said earlier, I don't go with that first, even though it's my most convincing, just because, I don't have the evidence. It's just a story from me. But being there in that moment and experiencing that, I can still feel the chills. The hairs are going up on my arm. So I would say that one.
Awesome. I suppose if you're going personally, my own one, the logo for the pod, where we saw the object and the saucer, or kind of, I say saucer, that's kind of shape it was on its side, lots of lights firing around at a really weird angle in the mid-90s, no evidence. Always wish we'd walked towards it a bit, further down the road. Couldn't have done any harm, I don't think.
You might not be here if you'd have done that, right?
No, maybe not, yeah.
No pod.
Even butterfly effect stuff, you never know.
Exactly.
But I mean, bigger ones that I suppose the question was probably aimed at. Like, I always say Phoenix Lights, don't I? Too many people saw something huge flying overhead, passing overhead, that we were so, and the frustration being we were so close to mobile phones being a thing and camera phones being a thing. We could have got lots. I'd love to see something like that now. I imagine even now the footage would still be low quality, given it would be nighttime, dark, people trying to film the sky on their phones. But can you imagine hundreds of videos or something like that in the sky?
Yeah.
And we've been almost teased it with some of that stuff recently. I know it was more than likely the hoax, but the family in was it LA? Last week they reported the alien crashing in the back garden stuff. So we'd be so close to something like that, and you never know. Maybe that's the next logical step for that big boom that the mainstream media starts to pick up on things again.
That'd be good.
Dan, can you hear that? What were you going to say? Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, a big event that isn't personal to me, the one that kind of similar to your Phoenix Light was one that I'd be like, if that happened these days, would they be amazing? Would be the Battle of LA. The famous photo exists where you can kind of see the disc in the middle. That photo has been enhanced and played with, and the disc that you can see isn't the disc. But I recently got to review a print of the original before the newspaper kind of messed with it at David Marler's archive, and you can see that, like, the beams stop. There's something there. The spotlight beams that the military are, shining on this object that's in the sky and firing at. There's something present there. And it would be really cool if that was to happen in the modern day. But supposedly a chunk got blown off one of those things. Some of the shells that were being fired killed people. So, like, what happened? That's one for me that just doesn't get enough attention.
Dan, can you hear that knocking in the background?
I can't.
No, it's American Andy, Dan, and he is here to remind listeners of That UFO Podcast to vote for That UFO Podcast in the British Podcast Awards. Andy is doing this accent just for you, for all you listeners who like to hear him talk like this, and he's trying so hard not to laugh. So if you vote for That UFO Podcast, link in the description, in the British Podcast Awards, and try and get us back into the top 20, that would be super cool awesome. Thank you, folks. Thank you, American Andy. That was much appreciated. He's gone now, Dan. Don't ask him any questions.
I like his backwards cap.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, he's gone. YouTube viewers going, what? Thanks, folks. So if you could vote, the link is in the description. Just search That UFO Podcast. You do have to then click a link that you get in an email. I appreciate if you take 30 seconds to do it. It means a lot. And of course, if you're bored this weekend, Dan has nothing better to do. He likes to make up lots of fake email addresses and vote for multiple competitions multiple times. I'm not saying you should do that, but thing. If you've got kids, wives, husbands, friends, family, and people you hate, get them to do it. It'll be a fun bonding activity. We'll come back, Dan, in the next couple of days and get part 2 recorded. Lots to get through. I am going to go take a toilet break and then get recording with Congressman Tim Burchett. It is getting late here, so hopefully I can stay awake for it. I'm sure I will. But thank you, Dan, for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you for all the awesome questions to people to send them in. I look forward to the next part.
Yep, thanks, folks, and I hope they all made sense because I didn't reword a single thing. And we will speak very, very soon. That is all for this week's show. Thank you very much for listening. Please remember to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. You can like, retweet, and subscribe. That would all be very much appreciated. The shows are being uploaded onto YouTube as we speak more and more. You can sign up at patreon.com/That UFO Podcast to access the shows ad-free as well. Please get in touch on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, That UFO Podcast. Of course, on Twitter, it's at UFO UAPAM. And again, folks, as always, keep looking up. You never know what you might see.
steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his ass, but I'd had some champagne and smoked a little around. Meditative gamma state full on meta. I can't imagine how it could have been any better. I got to the top of the stairs and there he was. Like, you awake? I was about to abduct you, cuz. I jumped back and nearly kissed myself, and I climbed out the window after the elf, and I woke up in my bed and there was something on my head and everything was weird and everything was red. And I called out to my boys. They thought this was noise. They thought it was a dream. They thought it was my toys. They thought it was my problems, and they think I should seek therapy, and I don't know what to do because it doesn't really scare me. If you really want to know who I think they'd be, I think it's you and me and us and we and him and her and that and she and that thing over there and what's that, Jake? If we're being serious, open your mind, consider your heart, consider time, consider your space, consider your lies, consider your life, consider your eyes. It wasn't a Tic Tac and not quite a saucer.
What's that in the class with you that's on a boom? Got sleep paralysis and got within my room.
It wasn't a Tic Tac and not quite a saucer.